my name is Camille Roberts. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Marketing in the Digital Age, the Analytics Advantage with Francois Boissier, founding partner of Human One and DataXu CEO Mike Baker. We'll wait a couple minutes for everyone to join in, and then we'll get started. Before we get started, we have a few housekeeping items. You'll be in listen-only mode to cut down on background noise. The control panel that you see in front of you can be opened and closed by clicking on the red arrow button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. If you have any questions during the webinar, you can send them by opening the control panel and then typing them in the question box. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll send you an email with a link to the recording in the next day or two. If you want to tweet interesting bits of information, please use the hashtag #PoundBigData. Joining us today is Francois Boissier. Francois is a founder and partner at Human 1.0, a management consulting firm, and a board member and senior fellow at the Society for New Communications Research. Francois headed the Digital Marketing 2 study, the results of which we'll be hearing about today, and is a co-leader of the annual Tribalization of Business study on how companies leverage communities and social media as part of their business processes. We're also joined by Mike Baker, thought leader in the digital media and advertising industries and co-founder of DataXu. DataXu uses machine learning to power an innovative real-time decision system that major advertisers in automotive, financial services, e-commerce, consumer packaged goods, and other industries use to find and engage customers across multiple media channels. Our agenda today is how consumer behavior is changing marketing, the big data opportunities, the Digital Marketing 2.0 study, what marketers need to win, and key takeaways before we get into Q&A. And now, without further ado, I'll turn the session over to Francois and Mike. Mike?
Thanks, Camille. Hi, everyone. It's Mike Baker. Francois, thank you for joining me. We're going to discuss the research we conducted with the marketing industry to sort of get to the heart of this situation where we have the two mega trends of the digital lifestyle on the one hand and big data on the other. And in between these two trends, we sort of see the image of the CMO and the enterprise marketer and agencies sort of trying to figure the space out. So before we get into the research, I'm going to walk through briefly the two mega trends, the digital lifestyle and big data. So first, the digital lifestyle. We're in an era where ubiquitous computing is changing everything. We have 8 trillion text messages shuttling around the world last year, 6 billion cell phone plans worldwide, and 2 billion internet users. We're always on, always connected, and this is not just a phenomenon in the U.S., but is really a global phenomena brought to you by the mobile infrastructure in really all regions of the world. And this ubiquitous computing and digital devices, it's fairly obvious now, it's just fundamentally changing people's behavior. Today we're talking about consumers, which is people who buy things, but it's actually more profound and deeper than that. This is changing the way children are being educated. This is changing the way cars are being purchased, or even the necessity for a car, as we're recently reminded. And of course, it's changing our entertainment and even communication patterns. And in this context, we have to sort of re-examine how consumers are behaving.
Mike, thank you for having me. I think as a lifelong marketer, I think that that's really the core of what's shaking marketing today is this shift in consumer behavior. I think that the customer has changed, and that's what marketers need to realize. The customer doesn't have to listen to us anymore in order to buy necessarily. They have access to data that comes from other sources. They have access to other customers that have perhaps used these products. So that's the core of what's shaking up marketing, I think, these days.
Well, it's not just the consumer behavior that's changing. The business of marketing is changing pretty dramatically. And one can describe this as the process of sort of trying to catch up with consumers, with marketers being, some number of steps behind them. But marketing is becoming something that is very time-based, where intenders of consumers who are likely to buy or consider purchase of a product are being competed over in terms of dynamic messaging and even things like the auction-based media that is now really sort of creating marketplaces for consumer attention time. This is actually a visualization of an automobile company's sort of real-time decisioning technology and in investments throughout the U.S. and across product types based on consumer behavior online. This is now possible to map. I think the broader point, though, is that we, as we lead our lives digitally, increasingly are really creating huge amounts of information. I know my company is already at petabyte scale, and I think that'll be more and more common for anybody trying to do research or engage consumers to just derive tremendous amounts of information, because everything we do now is creating a wake. I call it a data contrail. And this really sets up an interesting opportunity. The opportunity for marketers is, as I invest in this sort of two-way conversation with consumers, which may be consumer to consumer or consumer to brand, et cetera, I'm creating a tremendous number of siloed digital assets, anything from a Facebook fan page to branded content that's rich media. And I actually have the opportunity for the first time to harness the data that's generated through engagement, or actually even lack of engagement with my assets, to sort of describe how consumers are behaving relative to my brand. And so the big opportunity, as we see it, this age of this emerging age of big data, is to harness the data for not only consumer insights, but perhaps even more importantly, fast decisions that can have an ROI impact and can even in some ways provide a funding mechanism for building new data capabilities through improved efficiencies in the act of marketing. The old way of marketing is getting pretty long in the tooth in this era. We all know surveys and focus groups and panels where we derive or infer broad segment-based demographic trends or preferences for our products based on relatively small groups of people responding explicitly to surveys. Francois, I know you have a lot of experience in the old way of marketing and the new.
I know. I know. They don't, not only do we do it with small groups of people that we pay money sometimes to have them do it, but those people, will typically lie to us. The reason is because they lie to themselves. They make themselves look like things that they are not, and they will tell you things that they think you want to hear. It's interesting to me that anthropologists figured this one out in the mid-19th century. So in the mid-19th century, the way they were studying cultures was they would invite the Aboriginals to the back of the boat, and the captain would have a standardized questionnaire and ask questions. And they did that because they didn't have enough anthropologists to put on every boat, and so they did it through standardized questionnaires, and those standardized questionnaires would go back to Oxford. And at some point in time with a South American tribe, the tribe came in and they said, yes, we're cannibals, yes, we eat people, but we only eat the bad ones, and the weak ones, and the old ones, not the good ones. And what actually turned out is that, those people were not cannibals at all, okay? Now, we marketers are still trying to understand consumers the same way that, the anthropologists did it back then. I mean, fast forward early 2000, and I was talking to the CMO at JetBlue, and he says, we did exactly the same thing. At some point in time, we wanted to revamp our snack line, and we went and asked people, what kind of snacks would you like? And guess which one came out number one? Healthy snacks, of course. And so we came out with a series of, a suite of healthy snacks, and nobody ate them. People want those, those blue chips, I guess. So anyway, it's interesting for me to see that, yes, this should be the old way of marketing, but it's still very prominent in this century.
Interesting. Well, today we can use the internet, which is in some ways a giant sensor connecting us, but also connecting us to our passions to sort of better understand what people actually do. As you say, Francois, we'd rather know what they do than what they say they do. And the good news is, with digital marketing today and data management, there's the ability to collect this information at little charge and essentially in runtime to make better marketing decisions. So before we go into the research, I'm going to give you guys on the phone sort of a technologist viewpoint of what's happening with big data and where we're going. We historically, in collecting information, trying to glean insights, and make good business decisions, have had very little information, and we've made sort of giant decisions about a vendor or what kind of snack chip we're going to provide. So we come into the digital era, what we're seeing is we have a lot more information, and that we sort of need to make decisions all the time. And these decisions, however, are not high-impact decisions. There's lots of little decisions made with big data. And we're really coming into an era now where the analytics stack and the software from the technology companies like DataXu and others is sort of big data with small decisions made very quickly. And this is really a new paradigm for the way that marketers will operate with this information as we go forward. So with that, let's get into the study and go through some of the feedback we got from you, the senior leaders of the marketing industry, about how you're doing with digital marketing and big data. So Francois, you want to kick us off?
Sure, yeah. So the study, like Camille said earlier, was done between DataXu, the Society for New Communications Research, and Human 1.0, and it consisted of two components. One was sort of more of a quantitative survey that people filled out, so it was about a 20-minute survey or something like that about 350 people took. And then we supplemented that by having in-depth qualitative interviews with senior leaders in the industry to make sure that we got to all of the nuances that you can't necessarily get to all the time by just looking at survey data. So, and the first, if we go to the next slide, the first sort of finding that we saw is that 80% of people who participated in the study believe that digital marketing will allow better understanding of consumer behavior than any other type of marketing, which to me is sort of, surprising in a way. I mean, it's not surprising because, there's a lot written about it and all that, but it's surprising to see this to be a belief by marketers if you realize how siloed marketing organizations are, and if you realize how, maybe we don't have the right talent in order to sort of, hold this belief. I mean, it's so in a way it's and as you will see from the rest of the study, there are indeed, we did uncover a lot of sort of, huge barriers and obstacles that marketers need to overcome in order to fulfill this belief. So if you go to the next slide, the next thing that we found is that, obviously, lots of budgets are shifting towards digital. Actually, 72% of the respondents saw their budget shift to digital, and 83% saw expected it to continue. And by the way, in a lot of cases, that was a significant shift of budget. I mean, we had 55% of the people who said that the shift was more than 25% last year. So this significant shift's happening, and that's not surprising. You're seeing it, all over in the press recently with Procter & Gamble being in the press with that quite often. The other interesting part is that is when you look at the drivers that are causing this shift. And the drivers are, in order of importance based on the people who took the survey, they are increased measurability. Okay, so that's one of the big reasons why people want to shift to digital is increased measurability, better ROI, all of that. And as you will see later, there's some serious issues with that when it comes down to, to actually make that happen. The second one is increased customer engagement, consumer engagement. The third one is lower cost of acquisition. And the fourth one is better insights. And we'll deal with all of that as we move forward. So I'll pass it back to you, Mike.
Okay, well, so back to data, in the age of little data and our sort of increasing reliance on digital marketing and the digital channels for engagement, are things okay? So interestingly, 65% of the respondents believe they can segment, target, and message different audiences, so do some basic segmentation digitally, which is encouraging. And actually, surprisingly, 50% say they can exploit and integrate cross-channel. All this sounds very encouraging, but the question we had was, can you really do this well in an age where we're coming into vastly more amounts of data and channels and digital silos? So the next slide. 75% of the respondents believe they've been able to increase efficiencies and have done a good job dealing with data. And so how much of the euphoria over digital marketing can actually be backed up with numbers? We sort of question whether, how much backup there is for this and kind of where are we really in terms of, realizing the efficiencies that are promised with digital. In fact, we had to wonder, are we victims of survey respondents ourselves? As we'll see shortly, even in the era of little data, digital marketers were actually quite honest in describing and underscoring the cracks in their knowledge and abilities. And as we'll talk about, they pointed towards problems in platforms to measure and gather this data, problems with the needed analytic skills to make sense of it, and problems then with the systems that would use this information to increase business efficiency. So, what sort of is notable here is only about 30% of respondents think they have the information needed to confidently tell their leadership which digital marketing efforts have the highest ROI. So when the rubber meets the road and you got to talk to the boss, it's kind of hard to do so when you don't have hard, good data for the business case. So next slide, we think we're really more in the situation of we really don't know what we don't know. We don't have, as marketers, degrees in statistics, computer science, or math. We don't even know what sort of intelligence can be pulled from the big data streams. And it's really not like anything we've had to deal with in the past. And it's certainly not something that can be done, in a pivot table in a spreadsheet, which is, of course, how most marketers are spending their time doing, basic reporting. Francois, I'll turn it back to you to dig a little deeper.
Sure, yeah. So as we digged a little deeper, we started uncovering some interesting sort of facts about what is actually happening. So we've seen what they want to see happen, why they want to see happening, but when it comes to reality, 70% of respondents don't have or don't know if they have a 360-degree view of their customers, and 70% feel they aren't making adequate use of consumer data. I mean, that's sort of fascinating. It's like they're squandering all of that data that they have invested in capturing. So to me, it's really interesting to see that they want to have it, but but they're not being able to make it happen. And part of the reason, as Mike alluded to, is that, you know, this isn't just about data, this isn't just about digital, this is about technology, this is about people, this is about having the right talent, and we'll get back to that moving forward. But then the next slide, again, something that that is surprising. Remember, one of the top drivers, actually the top driver of shifting to digital, was increased measurability, and yet only 28% have the information to confidently tell their leadership team what delivers the highest marketing ROI. So they don't have the data to go tell their management how it's going. Okay, that's just reporting on the data. Forget trying to get insights to sort of drive strategy, right? And then only 25% say that IT's analysis of data permits real-time business decisions. Again, that's sort of mind-boggling to me, and it sort of points also. It's interesting. This question also points to something else that we found in the research, which is that if you think about big data, you would expect, and if you think about digital marketing, which is very technology-centric, you would expect the IT department to somehow be involved. And when we did the survey, what we found out is that they're actually not. Only 14% of the respondents involved their IT department in IT decisions, okay? And only 30% said that the CIO and their CMO form a partnership to truly understand customer behavior. So that's sort of very low. And then back to the top point, only 28% can sort of, report back. IT will have to be involved at some point in time, and they will have to change their mindset. Right now, when IT gets big data, what do they do with it? They store it, they secure it, and they serve it up in reports. And they're going to have to become partners to the rest of the organization to deliver actionable insights, from that big data. Back to you, Mike.
Yeah, it's a nice point. So to kind of pop it up a notch, we've described what some of the problems are. We as an industry in the marketing business have done pretty well with digital. We believe in it. We're seeking the efficiencies from it. We've made strides, and yet as we examine the details, we realize that maybe we've just scratched the surface, and our biggest gains are ahead of us still, as is the hardest work. So it begs the question, how do you win, and what needs to be done? Many of you are probably at this point looking at the research saying, this sounds right, this sounds familiar to me, but really the question is, what do I do about it? So we, in the survey, examined the people, the platform, and the ecosystem as the sort of three areas of interest for how to move forward. And really the answer, which we don't profess to have, nor do the respondents, is a combination of these three elements evolving. And so I think probably our course is to really engage in a conversation here as an industry, to better understand this, how these things combine. We need people with right analytical talent. We need platforms that are cross-channel digital marketing platforms. Those are really not in play predominantly today. And what people need to realize is that there's an ecosystem developing, that it's new, and that we need to take purposeful steps to understand and fit profitably as businesses into this ecosystem. So in the next slide, let's first talk about the people. A full 62% of people, if you go to the next slide, reported to rely on their marketing team to make technology recommendations. This is really quite stark, that the marketing department, which is, doesn't profess to be, sort of technology experts, data engineers, or decision scientists, is, predominantly making the decisions around the technology used in the environment. And I think it's notable here that in sort of phase one of digital marketing and advertising, which was, in some ways a little bit simpler, maybe. This may have been involved the decision on an ad server, or it may have involved a simple sort of reporting tool or even workflow system between an agency and a brand. But as we start to look deeper to just big data sets and the ability to report this and dashboard, and even beyond that, to facilitate good decision making in a business process, it's clear that this group of people need to guide the technologists, but probably not do the evaluations of data warehouses and how to integrate a data management platform that covers the media plan into a content management and recommendation system on a website. Notably, 55% of respondents rely on their CMO or marketing staff to make technology requirements, which seems a little bit more of a fit. I mean, the math specifically, 17% of the respondents rely on the CMO when selecting marketing and software technology, about 28% on the marketing staff, 6% on the chief digital officer or equivalent, and then 11% on the VP of digital. So quite a bit of decision making occurring within the marketing department, and to Francois' point, not great connectivity back to IT and those who are working on data in a broader sweep within the enterprise. The next slide. So these 62% of people who make the technology decisions for marketing, well, 58% believe they lack the analytical skills and technology to perform analytics on marketing data. So this is, I think a fairly predictable recognition that, most people in the field of marketing, do not have degrees in statistics or machine learning, or even even other quantitative fields that might be analogous. And we're reminded this is not just about marketing, but as we anticipate this sort of Internet of Things era where it's not just the people who are connected and communicating across the Internet, but actually it's people connected to things and things to things, and we just have sort of orders of magnitude more information. The need for people who swim in these waters of quantitative analysis is really growing in our economy. I think this is a McKinsey Global Institute study that shows us we're already sort of hundreds of thousands of jobs short in the requisite skills in this country to thrive in the data era, and this will only become exacerbated in the future as the data grows and businesses increasingly compete on their ability to capture and make sense of it. So lots of work to be done within the team of the marketing department and the firm beyond the marketing department. The second element of this is the platform. And we were actually surprised to see that the respondents listed the #1 biggest challenge to digital marketing's growth is the lack of a single cross-channel digital marketing platform. In fact, we now hear this term in play, omni-channel, and it's a recognition that consumers are driving sort of an ever-growing number of very unique, in some cases idiosyncratic, sort of digital experiences or communication paths. It's far beyond Facebook into sort of seemingly a new hot internet service every month, and so here we see the need for a system that can sort of reintegrate these like random acts of marketing that are sort of chasing consumers, and sort of make all the disparate communications and resultant data sort of cohere into a whole that can start to explain and in a consistent fashion how consumers are engaging with a brand.
It's also going to be a big challenge, I think, in terms of reconnecting, like you said, all the silos that they've allowed themselves to have in marketing. I was talking to a large retailer as part of the study, and they were trying to reconnect 80 sources of consumer data. So they have different brands, they have different stores, they have credit card information, they have the .com, which doesn't report into into marketing. They have the e-commerce group that doesn't report into .com nor marketing. I mean, you know, companies have their social marketing reporting into PR that is sometimes disconnected. You know, all those customer touch points are managed by different people, and so coming up with a you know, cross-channel strategy to be able to see the customer through their, you know, their journey, their customer journey, their buying journey, which could be, you know, I buy a computer for my business today, and I buy one for my son who's going to college tomorrow. That's all one journey, right? So I think people are really going to have challenges in fixing all those that history of silos. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we see many businesses who have really over the last 10 years perfected in some ways a CRM system. You know, when a customer becomes known to them to engage in continuous dialogue and communications. What's so different now, though, is that paradigm is sort of being broken because we don't really know necessarily who our customer is, where they are, when they care to engage, what they want. And so, you know, it's sort of this unidirectional, monolithic CRM paradigm is now being challenged by something that's multi-directional and involves sort of finding your consumer when and where they are rather than sort of sending a mail piece to their email address or even their home. So let's then move to the third area, which is the ecosystem. And here we want to talk about agencies a little bit. You know, one has to ask, and there's a lot of discussion, what is the role of the agency in sort of midst of this maelstrom between, you know, sort of big data and analytics? Go back a slide, please. And the digital lifestyle. And what's interesting is the procurement officers, which, you know, love them or hate them, you know, they will be driving relentlessly more efficiency. Which of course is one of the drivers of digital, although it's as if, you know, when the word efficiency comes up, the CFO sort of grabs the reins from the CMO's hand and then is driving this. And so here, 25% of the procurement officers want more marketing and services technologies in-house. It's really interesting, though, 75% recognize that they need to manage their own data. So it raises the question, well, who does manage data? And, you know, interestingly, much of the data today is coming out of the media investment. I mean, the bare act of ad serving, even if no one clicks on it, is now a piece of research that can actually guide, you know, a marketing department towards product marketing decisions. And so how does the enterprise get access to this information and use it strategically versus sort of having it siloed within, you know, an outsourced provider's you know, unwittingly siloed, it may be within the media relationship. So who has the answer? Is it agencies? Do they revamp to sort of become data and analytics experts? Is it the marketing department building these capabilities within? Is it the IT department developing a sort of a newfound affinity for marketing and helping to, you know, sort of drive the next wave of the infrastructure, or, you know, is it systems integrators, you know, who are going to help, you know, as they do about every 10 years, come in and you know, sort of put everything together to support, you know, the next wave of growth and the platforms required. You know, lastly, we could ask, is it technology application providers who are providing, you know, key parts of missing infrastructure that, you know, wind up wiring a new sort of integrated marketing way of working. So the ecosystem, I think, you know, I'd like to sort of leave the point of ecosystem on you know, back where we started, which was our respondent said the number one most important missing piece was this sort of integrated analytics platform sitting amidst all these stakeholders. There's a tendency amid uncertainty and dynamic business growth to sort of assume everything is a zero-sum game, but what I'd like to suggest is that actually a platform that has multiple user roles can actually serve as the glue, the connective tissue between a number of constituents each of whom has an important role to play here, whether it's the agency of record, media partners, internal business units devoted, within an agency or a brand specifically to using analytics to improve efficiency and effectiveness. And I think, here the research did show that, this information from such a platform could be, I think it was 67% of the people said this information could be tremendously valuable even beyond marketing. So question for you, Francois, as a lifelong marketer, how does that jive, in your view, with leveraging traditional agencies and marketing services companies to, in some ways, outsource the job of customer acquisition?
Well, that's a question I ask myself all the time. Is with the current business model of most agencies, if you're outsourcing it to an agency, they're really only using a very thin layer of the data that you as an organization have, right? I mean, they're using the sort of the advertising data. They're not accessing the customer the customer service data, the credit card data that I mentioned earlier, and all of that. So, to me, it raises the question: well, can you actually outsource your data? Your big data, sort of gaining insights from big data to your agency, which some companies are doing, or should you take it in-house? Or is there perhaps an opportunity for a new type of agency that takes on a bigger strategic role, that is not just going to focus on how to target a customer at the right time at the right place, but is also going to help the company with more strategic sort of product strategy, distribution strategy, pricing strategy issues? I don't know. What do you feel about it?
Well, I had this very conversation yesterday with a marketer who has traditionally relied on an outsourced services firm around database marketing, and of course, the observation from this particular marketer was that while they've had help managing a customer database for decades from an outsourced firm, not an agency, but really a database marketing firm, there was skepticism as to the ability of that firm to sort of ply the waters of digital data, and the sort of given the time dimension and the quantity. So it's an open question. Will there be a data agency of record, or a new kind of data services firm that is able to operate at the speed of digital and provide capabilities like a traditional database marketing firm?
It's interesting. I was interviewing Mike Mendenhall, who used to be the CMO at HP, where they did unbelievable things with regards to to big data, and a lot of that history came from when he was at Disney and running parks and stuff. So, but he is now he bought a new agency, Lipman, and he was saying, so he has the expertise as an in-house guy. Now he has an agency. He does it for clients, okay, but his agency model is also one where he's going to help strategically, help the clients decide how to come up with the next generation product. And the other thing that he told me is, he says, oftentimes what I end up being is, we end up being sort of the translator or the broker between the CMO and the CIO, which I thought was really interesting. So
that is interesting. Well, good. Let's wrap it up with the next slide, and then maybe we can take a few questions. So the key takeaways, to kind of take us back where we started, this is really about digital marketing and all it offers. And remember, it's important to remember the key drivers were increased measurability and accountability, which of course is a data-driven task. Increased customer engagement, which similarly, one needs to be able to assess and compare against a baseline to know that you're making progress. A lower cost of customer acquisition and better consumer insights. So, these are the drivers in the digital marketing age, and I think, what we've learned from this research is there's a high degree of optimism about the ability of digital to deliver this. We've done, as an industry, pretty well in our efforts to date, but as we reflect a little bit more deeply, we recognize that we have many unsolved problems in terms of taking this to the next level, using all the information that is now possible to glean from our sort of heavy investments in various kinds of digital engagement programs and marketing, and that really to crack through this next wave, we'll have to fundamentally supplement the people that we're working with to find integrated platforms to capture this information and show us the insights, as well as sort of simply act on the insights so that we can improve our businesses and show an ROI. And lastly, we'll have, of course, to form new relationships, whether it's existing providers developing new capabilities or new providers who come in to connect the dots here and support this new way of working. So with that, I will turn it back to Camille for any questions.
Okay, thanks Mike and Francois. I'd like to open up the presentation for questions now. To ask a question, please use the questions box located in the GoToWebinar utility panel. Okay, here's the first question. It's great to talk about hiring quants, but somebody needs to be a translator for these people. Who do you see playing that role?
It's funny.
You want to try it? Take that one, Francois.
I'll start with a story that I ran into last week, Mike, and then you can take it. I was talking to the head of predictive analytics or whatever at a large pharmaceutical company, and this guy was so articulate. He was great. And then at the end, I was like, I asked him. I said, "What's your background?" And he was like, "Well, I got my PhD in matter antimatter, and I did a postdoc in Stanford around matter antimatter. And because it was so deep in statistics and computers, I got some degrees in computers and statistics. And then I decided I didn't want to, work on all this abstract stuff. I wanted to deal with people, so I went and studied medicine." So this guy sort of studied it all so that he could indeed, do all of the predictive stuff himself. But I think that in reality, when we're going to hire people, we're going to hire people that are, having math and computer science sort of backgrounds and may not understand marketing that well. So I do believe that there will need to be, a new type of, whether it's a manager or whether it's but somebody to translate the needs of the business to those very, deep technical skills.
Well, what I would add here is you could challenge this question and say, well, do we really need to hire quants so much as intelligent people who can understand how to translate the business goal and how analytics can be helpful? I think I would argue that a reasonably intelligent person who's been trained can use the tools and that help to solve these problems. As we alluded to earlier, this is a new area of commerce and business and a new way of competing on information and data. And the tools to do this are sort of, in my view, migrating from the specialist and the IT and sort of the heavy-duty tech folks and quants into the business. We've seen this before in other facets of the enterprise, like sales, Salesforce.com, for instance, and even accounting systems for that matter. The systems themselves get more expert, so they reduce the need for the internal specialized experts and instead can support the workflow of people who have domain expertise, for instance, in marketing. So that's sort of how I think about this question as if I were a marketer, the approach I would take is to look for the right tools.
Mm-hmm. But then the other thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to be able to hire. So I agree with you. You need to hire people that have deep technical expertise that also understand the business. And if you hire smart people, they typically will do that. But at the same token, I think we will need to hire marketers that understand that world as well, so that they can talk on a sort of similar level with those people. Wouldn't you say so?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Here's a question on a different topic. Can you address the change in the ecosystem in the last 5 years And how do you think it should change in the immediate future?
Francois, maybe you're better suited to talk about the last 5 years, and I'll take how it might change in the future or should change. It's kind of a loaded question.
It is, yeah. I think, I think the ecosystem is under tremendous turmoil. I mean, lots of, marketing departments are reinventing themselves. They're being pushed by the CEO to become more strategic again. I think, we're seeing marketing departments become closer with their IT. Not enough, way not enough, but, CIOs and CMOs need to become best friends. I think, there's a lot of press right now around that, a lot of analysts focusing on that. I think that, agencies are trying to reinvent themselves. So it's a tremendous shift, I think, in the ecosystem over the past 3 years. And Mike, if you want to talk about where you think it should be going or where it's going and how we can shape it,
Yeah, the one thing to look into the future, what I do is say, well, what are the sort of mega themes that are driving the business decisions? And the one I'll make reference to, I think, was IBM's recent research on the CMO. It's very, very interesting to read what are the biggest impediments to change, knowing that you need to make it. And the two biggest ones are cost and lack of certain return on investment. So the mega theme here is the need to do more with less, to drive efficiencies and effectiveness. And we could pause here and say, by the way, that's like what information technology has done in every other department of the modern enterprise. So sort of marketing, for some reason, and Francois and others may have a better view on this historically than I do. It's been late to the game of just basically using IT to drive efficiency and effectiveness. In a digital world, where the signals are all digital, the inputs and outputs, it's really become a ripe opportunity to do this. So my view is how should the ecosystem change is just simply that the multi-layered, vendor structure of marketing with the media and the sort of digital production and the brand, I think it will change in that each intermediary will need to specifically define how they add value. And what is that value? And that's I'm not the judge of that. The client is, but there needs to be sort of demonstrable value added at each step of the chain. The internet, digital, it all brings transparency and shines a bright, sort of a Klieg light on, what incremental value is anybody providing. And I think that the answer to that question will, sort of naturally reorder the ecosystem.
Thank you. Next question is, where do we stand in terms of a cross-channel marketing platform? Does anybody actually have a solution today?
I'll try that. No, the answer is no. The answer, I'd love to say yes, and it's from DataXu. That's our objective. But to be, humble about it, the answer is no. What's interesting is actually to look at the industry structurally and say, the firms who perhaps have made the most aggressive investments have been sort of the world's largest media sellers thus far, and they're developing consumer engagement across channels, and it's sort of a natural outgrowth from that effort to provide easier ways for the buyers of that media to buy it and to integrate it. So the Googles and the Facebooks of the world are natural candidates. What's interesting, though, is we're starting to see technology companies who are independent of media interests, they're sort of not counterparties in a media transaction, provide tools that are specifically designed for the act of enterprise marketing. So again, it's back to this emerging category that there actually is a role for technology products that sort of sit between big data and marketing. And I think we are seeing tools there that are in theory sort of omni-channel. The rub is, have I plumbed this tool to, fluidly collect, get and post information from what is oftentimes, very sort of siloed, separated, channels of communication, be it search or email or display advertising. So I think that will be sort of important ground over the next 3 years, where you do start to see much more integrated platforms that sort of dramatically simplify things while bringing that promise, that hope for efficiency and effectiveness.
And Mike, do you see those platforms sort of, provide hooks for all of the players within the ecosystem that you talked about?
That's a great question, Francois. It's one, as a technologist, we talk a lot about APIs, and the API is the concept that these hooks can allow, in some sense, an open ecosystem to to connect and get and post information. I think that's tremendously valuable, and as an enterprise, I would sort of be especially interested in that, because with APIs, I know that a system I'm using has extensibility, and the one thing that we can probably all intuit right now is we seem to have a sort of ever proliferating number of digital things, whether it's communication oriented or entertainment or device oriented. We all know there's more of this coming. We haven't seen the sort of end of the exploding universe of digital engagement types.
Okay, thanks. Next question is on building a case for big data. It is, how does a marketing department build a case for using big data? How do you meet the conflicting requirements of starting within the budget and yet still gathering evidence to prove success in order to get executive and IT support?
That's a good question. I'll try to answer it. In my opinion, as a CEO, the thing that I need to see is a business case, and that needs to pencil out. You want to make a certain investment, and if successful, here's the benefit. The challenge with big data is sort of the size of the undertaking, and the potential to spend years integrating things, and to have a very sort of binary bet as to how efficient this is. So our counsel to companies is to try to do something small and that proves out in microcosm the basic ROI. And where we see people falling down is actually not sort of creating elaborate infrastructure to collect information. It's like actually doing something with it. So I think this is increasingly, it's the meme right now. It's like, hey, I'm collecting information, I'm stuffing into a big data warehouse, I'm writing queries and getting nice looking reports, but what I don't have is proof positive that has, improved the efficiency of the marketing department by 20%. And so I think there's the opportunity to actually establish pilots that use analytics and big data and decisioning to sort of immediately reduce a cost or provide an efficiency. And we've seen some of our customers have, been able to, in as little as 30 or 45 days say, hey, I just improved efficiency of something we've done for a while by 20%. So this is really interesting. Let's roll this out. Let's open up the pilot and go broader. So I think one of the benefits of cloud computing, of parallel processing technologies, all of these things that are the elements that allow us to crunch more data more quickly and less expensively, is you can actually work pretty quickly. One area where we've seen this happen in digital marketing is things like ad exchanges and bidding on media. By more efficiently acquiring the target audience you're looking for using data analytics, you've been able to see a step change in the cost of acquisition in some cases of marketing. So that's very interesting. Sort of how can we extend that very ROI positive, relatively simple task, and is that good evidence for us that the act of applying data and analytics to marketing, that there's a lot of headroom, for expanding that sort of thing.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that is I think you're dead on when you say, a lot of companies are sort of, reporting on the data instead of gleaning the insights from it. And the other thing to realize is that if one of your competitors is going to be gaining those actionable insights from the big data and be able to fulfill a latent need or an unmet need or whatever need is out there, faster than you can, okay, then they will just take away market share and profitability away from you. It's that simple. So it's not a matter of investing in big data. It's a matter of what do you do with it, and the thing to do with it is provide actionable, actions.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. We'll be sending you a link to the recording of the webinar, as well as a link to the Digital Marketing 2 study results.
Well, great. Thanks, Camille, and thanks for Francois for making the time, and we'll look forward to doing this again.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.